It began like any other taping day at the Late Show with Stephen Colbert, a liberal-leaning audience filling the studio, the band warming up, and the host reviewing his monologue. But this time, there was an undercurrent of anticipation. Tonight's guest wasn't a Hollywood star or a Democratic senator. It was Karoline Leavitt, the unapologetic, rising conservative firebrand, former White House press secretary, and one of the youngest political voices making waves on the right. She had agreed to appear on Colbert's show after a week of back-and-forth negotiations. The premise: a conversation about media misinformation and the role of press secretaries in shaping public perception. But both sides knew this wouldn't be a polite exchange of ideas. It was war, dressed up in comedy. The teaser clip Colbert's team posted earlier that morning had already stirred a storm. In it, he looked into the camera and said with a smirk, "Tonight, the Queen of MAGA messaging herself is coming to explain why facts don't matter, as long as you say them with a smile." The clip ended with studio laughter, but Twitter erupted. Conservatives called it a setup. Liberals said they couldn't wait to watch her crumble. Karoline saw the clip on her way to the studio in the back of a black SUV. She rewatched it 3 times, her jaw tightening with each playback. Her team had warned her, it's a trap. He's going to mock you, corner you, edit it however he wants. But Karoline didn't care. "Let him try," she said, pulling a folded document from her bag and tucking it into her blazer. "They think I came to play defense. I didn't." She entered the CBS building. Camera crews tracked her every step. She wore a fitted navy suit, a small cross necklace gleaming under the lights, the same look she wore when confronting journalists on the White House lawn. Colbert, in contrast, wore a grin. "She's about to step into the lion's den," he whispered to his producer backstage. "Let's see if the cub can roar." The studio lights dimmed. The opening music played. The crowd cheered as Stephen took his seat behind the desk. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we have a special guest. She's bold, she's controversial, and she's definitely got fans and critics. Please welcome Karoline Leavitt." Applause echoed, mixed with murmurs. Karoline stepped out confidently and sat across from Colbert. Their eyes locked, 2 worlds colliding in real time. In that instant, before a single word was spoken, the air tightened with the promise of something explosive. This wasn't just late-night TV. It was political theater. And Karoline was ready to rewrite the script. The band faded out. The applause simmered, leaving a few seconds of silence between Stephen Colbert and Karoline Leavitt, 2 professionals trained in verbal combat, seated under the bright, unflinching lights of American television. Colbert leaned forward first, adjusting his glasses with a performative ease. "Karoline, thank you for joining us. I know it's not exactly home turf for you here." Karoline gave a half smile. "I'm comfortable wherever facts matter." The audience gave a polite chuckle, unsure who just scored the first point. Colbert tilted his head. "So, let's get right into it. You've been accused of being a leading voice in spreading misinformation during your time as White House press secretary. COVID numbers, the border, the 2020 election. Should I go on?" Karoline didn't flinch. "You can go on, but it won't make you right." Colbert cracked a grin. "See, that's what I love about you. No matter how clear the facts are, you find a way to say the opposite with conviction." Laughter rippled through the crowd, emboldening him. "You once told a reporter on live TV that President Trump had secured the border better than any modern president. Do you still stand by that?" Karoline's eyes narrowed slightly. "Absolutely. You want to compare numbers, Stephen? I've got them right here." She tapped the inside pocket of her blazer, but didn't pull anything out yet. Colbert raised an eyebrow. "Okay, so you're saying the massive footage we all saw, families separated, overcrowded facilities, migrants under bridges, that's what success looks like?" Karoline's tone sharpened. "You're talking about images. I'm talking about outcomes. And outcomes show border crossings dropped significantly under our policies. But go ahead. Quote headlines instead of DHS data." The room tensed. Colbert's smile flattened briefly. Then he turned to the camera. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've entered the spin zone." He pivoted. "You also said that mainstream media has blood on its hands for how it covered COVID. That's an aggressive claim. Care to walk it back?" Karoline didn't blink. "No, I'll walk it forward. When media outlets downplayed lab leak theories, silenced doctors, and weaponized fear for ratings, yes, that hurt people. You're laughing. But I've spoken with families who couldn't say goodbye to loved ones because of hysteria you helped create." The crowd gasped. Colbert tried to recover. "That's a powerful accusation. You think I created hysteria?" Karoline leaned in. "Not just you, but you played your part." Colbert shifted in his seat, glancing at the prompter. He had prepared singers, but she wasn't playing into them. She was flipping the tone from comedy to confrontation. "Pivot," he said. "You also defended Trump after January 6th. Said he did everything within his power to stop the violence. You don't think that's misinformation?" Karoline's lips tightened. "You want to talk about that day? Let's talk about the security requests denied, the timelines ignored. But we both know you're not interested in truth. You're interested in narrative." The crowd murmured again. Stephen took a breath. "You know, some say that's the definition of gaslighting." Karoline finally reached into her blazer. "And some say it's time to stop calling truth misinformation just because it's inconvenient. Want to read what DHS actually said?" She held up the paper, but didn't hand it over. "Not yet." Stephen glanced at it, then back to the camera. "Well, folks, we're just getting started." But anyone watching could already feel Karoline wasn't here to be the punchline. The lights buzzed overhead, and for a moment, the studio audience wasn't sure whether to laugh, clap, or simply stare. Stephen Colbert's grin was thinning. His jokes weren't landing like they used to not against his guest. Karoline Leavitt wasn't playing the role he'd cast for her. She wasn't flustered. She wasn't defensive. She was sharp and something colder. Prepared. Colbert cleared his throat. "Let's talk about what you just held up. That DHS memo. You seem eager to make your case. Go ahead. Enlighten us." Karoline unfolded the paper calmly. "This is from the Department of Homeland Security. Dated January 3rd, 2021, 3 days before the Capitol riots. It shows Trump's administration requested additional National Guard support. It was denied. By whom? That's a longer conversation, but the point is, our side tried." Stephen leaned back, his smirk fading into something resembling concern. "So, your argument is Trump tried to stop the riot?" "My argument," she said slowly, "is that truth has been buried under headlines crafted to destroy him and people like me for years." A few audience members clapped. The rest stayed silent. Colbert pressed. "But what about the tweets? The silence? The 3 hours it took him to speak?" Karoline turned to him. 3 hours. Stephen Pelosi was in charge of Capitol security. The sergeant at arms reports to her. Why didn't they act sooner? Stephen's face stiffened. "So, it's Pelosi's fault now, I'm saying," she replied. "It's convenient how the media forgets the chain of command when it suits the story." The studio grew still. Colbert reached for his mug, buying time. "Right," he said, raising his eyebrows. "Let's take a breath." But Karoline didn't let up. "You asked me here to explain myself, and I will. But I won't sit here while you throw edited headlines and pretend it's fact. You want to talk about lying on national television? Let's talk about how CNN, MSNBC, even your own team called the Hunter Biden laptop Russian disinformation. That lie changed an election." The crowd murmured. Someone audibly said, "She's not wrong." Colbert gave a tight smile. "Are we doing laptop now? Okay, sure. But Karoline, those intelligence officials, 51 of them, signed a letter." She interrupted. "A letter that said it had the classic earmarks of Russian disinformation, not evidence, just opinion. And legacy media ran with it, you included. Colbert opened his mouth, then closed it again. For once, the late-night host had no punchline ready. The silence between them was louder than any applause. "I came here," Karoline continued, knowing he tried to paint her as some fringe figure, a mega puppet, as his side loves to say. But, just maybe, the puppet is the one reading from scripts that hide the truth. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Stephen sat still, blinking. Karoline turned to the audience, her voice steady. "You were promised comedy tonight, but the real joke is how long we've let entertainers pose as journalists." Low gasp. Then a ripple of claps from the conservative side of the audience. Then louder. Stephen reached for a new card on his desk. But the tone of the room had already shifted. The balance of power, subtly, unmistakably, had begun to lean in her favor. This wasn't going to be another Colbert takedown. This was the beginning of Karoline's counteroffensive, and she was just getting started. The moment Karoline's final line left her lips, the studio didn't know how to respond. It was as if someone had thrown a stone through a glass window of expectation. Even Colbert, typically the maestro of turning awkward silences into laughs, sat stiff behind his desk. His hand twitched toward the cue cards, but his eyes betrayed what his rehearsed smile tried to hide. He had lost the beat of the show. Karoline didn't gloat. She didn't flash a smirk or soak in the applause. She simply leaned back in her chair and crossed her legs, calm as ever, as if she knew this exact moment was coming. And outside that New York City studio, the moment exploded. Clips of her DHS memo comments, her Hunter Biden challenge, and her now infamous line. "The real joke is how long we've let entertainers pose as journalists." Hit X, formerly Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok within minutes, on conservative accounts. The video spread like wildfire, posted with captions like, "Karoline just nuked Colbert live. Gen Z just flipped the late-night script. She walked into the lion's den and walked out with his cards." On X, the hashtag Karoline flips the script rocketed to the top 5 trends in under 30 minutes. A side-by-side meme of Karoline holding the DHS memo and Colbert awkwardly frozen mid-reach went viral with the caption, "You lied on national TV." She brought the receipt. Inside the studio, the producers scrambled. They had planned for a clever, viral takedown. One that would leave Karoline looking like another loud, uninformed conservative caught in the late-night headlights. Instead, they were now in damage control mode, whispering into Colbert's earpiece, signaling the team to cut early to commercial. But Stephen resisted. He leaned forward, forcing a grin. "Well, Karoline, you've certainly come ready. But let me ask, do you really believe the media's job is to lie? That we're all just puppets?" Karoline met his gaze. "I believe some people use comedy as a shield. They hide behind punchlines to avoid the truth. You've joked about conservatives for years, but what happens when one answers back without laughing?" Stephen blinked. She added, "You invited me here, expecting a caricature. What you got was a persona young woman who's tired of being labeled, mocked, and dismissed just because I work for someone you hate." The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't boo. They listened. Colbert looked down, his usual rhythm broken. His next question was softer, more cautious. "Do you think the country's too far gone to even have these conversations anymore?" Karoline paused. "Only if we let entertainers keep pretending they're referees." That one hurt. You could feel it. The camera operators held their shots longer than usual. One of the producers in the control room whispered, "We're losing this one." Backstage, Karoline's team, 2 young assistants, and a former Trump campaign press lead were already watching the numbers climb. The YouTube live chat was flooded with MAGA hats, fire emojis, and one-liners like, "This is why they're scared of Gen Z conservatives." By the time the commercial break finally hit, Colbert sat in silence while Karoline adjusted her mic. "I'm ready for round 2, she said casually. Colbert forced a smile. "We'll be right back." Okay, but even he knew This wasn't a show anymore. It was a reckoning. The screen faded in from black. The band played a low, jazzy riff, and Colbert, ever the seasoned host, put on a well-practiced grin. But something had changed. The air wasn't light anymore. It wasn't punchlines and easy applause. It was tension, raw, unfiltered, and fully unscripted. He leaned into the camera, his voice smooth but slightly thinner than before. "We're back with Karoline Leavitt, White House press secretary and evidently part-time memo reader," he quipped, hoping for laughs. A few chuckles came from the audience, but they were hesitant, scattered. Almost guilty, Karoline turned toward the crowd, then calmly back to Colbert. "You know, Stephen, when you mock what I do, you're not just mocking me. You're mocking the people. I represent millions of Americans who don't see themselves in Hollywood, who don't clap for your monologues. They're tired of being the joke." He blinked. "But Karoline, you've got to admit Trump makes it easy. Stan may be the real joke," she said slowly. "It's how obsessed the media is with a man they claim they want gone." That line pierced through the set. Even some of the liberal-leaning producers glanced at each other behind the cameras. Colbert tried to move on. "All right," he said, flipping a card with slight irritation. "Let's shift gears. You said earlier that President Biden has failed at every turn. Tell me, what exactly has Trump done better?" She didn't flinch. The economy, border security, energy independence, and most importantly, he never used comedy to distract from policy failure. Colbert rolled his eyes. "So now, comedy is the enemy." Karoline leaned forward. "Number misinformation in a laugh track is still misinformation. People think if they're laughing, they're not being manipulated. But propaganda with a punchline is still propaganda." The room went still again. Colbert opened his mouth, then closed it. She added, "You called me a liar on national television, but all I did was bring facts. That DHS memo you laughed at, it's been verified. The Hunter Biden laptop you brushed off. Even CBS acknowledged it. So who's spreading misinformation? Stephen?" Silence. Stephen looked off stage, clearly seeking a lifeline. The teleprompter was blank. No script for this. Backstage, Twitter was exploding. Elon Musk had retweeted a clip from the exchange with a fire emoji and 3 words. "She came ready." The original video now had over 2.3 million views, just 20 minutes into airing. Fox News ran a banner, Karoline flips late night show into a press conference. On Truth Social, Donald Trump posted, "Karoline was brilliant tonight. Took down Colbert without breaking a sweat. This is what strength looks like." Colbert cleared his throat. "You're very confident for someone so young." Karoline smiled faintly. "Confidence comes from preparation. You came with jokes. I came with receipts." The crowd clapped. Not wildly, but enough. Enough to show the balance had shifted. Karoline wasn't a guest anymore. She was running the room. The band played softly again, as if unsure whether they were part of a comedy show or a political reckoning. And Karoline, she just sat there, composed, clear, and undefeated. As the stage lights softened and a new graphic flashed on the screen, Colbert attempted to steer the tone back into late-night levity. "All right," he said, adjusting his collar. "I guess this is what happens when you try to fact-check a press secretary on air." But the damage was done. The dynamic had flipped. Karoline didn't wait for the next punchline. She calmly reached into her folder again and held up a second document, its DHS letterhead unmistakable. "This is the second memo," she said, her voice crisp, "dated just 2 months ago. It confirms that over 400,000 encounters at the southern border were classified as non-processed due to overwhelmed conditions. That's not a border. That's a breach." The audience murmured. Colbert sighed. "Karoline, you know these memos lack context. That's your favorite phrase when the facts don't help your side." Ski snapped back. "No context erases 400,000 illegal crossings. Just like no context erases $6 gas prices, fentanyl overdoses, or Afghanistan. Stephen exhaled sharply. You're not here to debate, are you? You're here to deliver a monologue. Karoline smiled. Funny, I thought that was your job. The crowd gasped. Producers in the back were texting furiously. Ratings were spiking. Real-time engagement showed over 10,000 comments pouring in on YouTube Live. But not all were in Colbert's favor. The top comment read, "She just reversed the entire power dynamic of this show. This is historic," another said. "She didn't bring fire. She brought artillery." Karoline folded her papers with the calm of someone who had just delivered a sermon in enemy territory. Her eyes met Stephen's. Like, you accused me of lying, Stephen? National TV, millions watching. You laughed. But tonight, I gave you the truth, and you flinched. You called me a mouthpiece, but maybe you're the one echoing a script. Colbert shifted in his seat. You want the last word, don't you? No, she said, standing. I just want America to know that not everyone folds under pressure. Not everyone bows to the late-night narrative. She turned to the audience. I came here accused of lying. I leave here proving the opposite. And if you think this is the last time someone like me will walk onto a show like this and speak the truth, you're in for a long decade. The room burst into applause. Not from everyone, but from enough. Colbert looked at the camera, speechless for the first time that night. Karoline walked off stage, her black heels clicking on the floor like punctuation marks. Outside, Fox News cameras were already rolling. A producer whispered, "We've never seen anything like that online." The phrase, "She flipped the script," trended #1 on X, followed by Colbert shook and Karoline victory tour. Inside the studio, Colbert took a sip of water and said quietly to the crew, "We're cutting that last segment down, way down." But it was too late. Karoline had taken control of the narrative, and the country had already seen it happen live as she stepped out of the studio into the cool New York night. The city felt different, not because the lights had dimmed or the air had changed, but because something fundamental had shifted. Within minutes of the segment airing, social media detonated. Screens across America lit up with reposts of the moment Karoline stood and said, "Up, you called me a liar, but you're the one echoing a script." A clip hit 1 million views on X in less than 10 minutes. News Nation titled it bluntly, "Karoline wrecks Colbert." Fox News pinned this segment on their homepage. Even neutral outlets like Politico posted the clip under, "Did Colbert just get outflanked?" At Mar-a-Lago, Donald Trump was watching. "Get her on the phone," he said sharply to an aide. When Karoline answered, her voice still buzzing from adrenaline, Trump didn't hesitate. "That was beautiful," he said, his tone almost uncharacteristically reverent. "You did what every conservative dreams of, and you did it on his turf." That was Reagan meets Twitter. Karoline chuckled. "I figured if they're going to accuse me of lying, I might as well bring the truth in print." Trump laughed. "You're not just my press secretary anymore. You're my frontline general." Within moments, he posted on Truth Social, "Karoline Leavitt destroys Colbert. She walked into the lion's den and came out a legend. The fake news would try to spin it, but millions saw the truth. Karoline is the future, a true patriot." The post was shared over 60,000 times in under an hour. Meanwhile, liberal commentators scrambled to contain the fallout. MSNBC's Joy Reid said Karoline was well rehearsed, while CNN's Don Lemon called her a bulldozer, not a debater. Even they couldn't ignore the effectiveness of her delivery. A CNN segment admitted she knew her audience and used Colbert's own studio as her pulpit. Outside the studio, Karoline gave a brief impromptu statement to waiting reporters. "I was accused on national TV of lying to the American people," she said, her voice steady. "So I came with the truth, not spin, not late-night punchlines. Truth in black and white. A reporter shouted, "Do you think Colbert regrets having you on?" Karoline smiled. "If he doesn't now, he will tomorrow morning." She turned, her black coat flowing behind her as chants began to swell from a nearby group. "Karoline, Karoline, Karoline." She didn't wave. She didn't stop. She just walked, because the war of words wasn't over. It had just begun. Backstage at CBS Studios, the mood had flipped. What began as an easy ratings grab, Stephen Colbert facing off with a rising conservative figure, had become an uncontrolled blaze. Producers huddled in corners, whispering into half-raised headsets. The post-show review room, usually buzzing with banter, now echoed with quiet tension. One assistant held up her tablet. The clip of her ripping the script. It's already been re-uploaded in 14 languages. Colbert sat silently in his dressing room, not angry, not even rattled, just stunned. He watched the footage again on his phone. Karoline rising, holding the folder, her voice calm but explosive. It wasn't just that she brought receipts. It was how she delivered them, not in a rage, not in a meltdown, but with precision. His longtime producer leaned into the doorway. "You want to do a follow-up?" Colbert looked up, searching for a number that would validate her. But deep down, he knew she'd already been validated. Meanwhile, Karoline's team gathered in a black SUV outside, watching the reactions spread in real time. One aide handed her a phone. Jim Jordan had just texted, "That was fire." Another, "You're trending above Beyonce in New York." Karoline didn't smile. She was already looking ahead. "They're going to come harder next time," she said. This wasn't a knockout punch. This was the warning shot. She tapped out a single post on X. "Facts always beat fiction. Next time, bring more than a monologue." Inside the CBS corridors, a stagehand leaned to another. "She didn't just show up," he whispered. "She rewrote the whole segment while live." That same night, conservative circles lit up with celebration. The Daily Wire ran the headline, "Karoline just did what Congress couldn't." Turning point. USA's founder posted, "She's our future, period." Even figures like Elon Musk liked a clip of the moment she called out scripted satire disguised as journalism. But not everyone was cheering. AOC reposted the segment and wrote, "This is what happens when the far right gets airtime, lies in a pretty package." Karoline replied, "Your policies collapse under sunlight. That's not my fault." The retorts surged through social media like electricity behind all of it. Karoline knew the next phase wasn't about one viral moment. It was about solidifying her message. She turned to her comms director in the car. "Get me a sit down. Not with Fox. I want Axios, PBS. Let's show them I don't just clap back. I build arguments." This wasn't his press anymore. This was positioning. And Karoline Leavitt had just walked from TV guest to movement symbol without ever raising her voice. Stephen Colbert's fingers twitched slightly on the desk. No longer calm or collected. The smirk that had defined his posture earlier in the segment was gone, replaced by something closer to discomfort. Karoline Leavitt's line, "You lied on national TV," wasn't just a jab, it was a detonation. The studio fell into a dense silence that even the cameras seemed hesitant to break. Stephen leaned forward, trying to recover. "Karoline," he began, voice cooler than before. "This is a comedy show. We don't operate under courtroom standards. Everything said here is satire, nuanced, often exaggerated. That's the point." But Karoline didn't blink. She held her ground. "There's a difference between satire and spreading misinformation," she said firmly, her voice cutting through the tension. "When you misquote a sitting president and edit clips to make him look insane, and millions believe it, that's not comedy. That's manipulation." A few people in the front row clapped cautiously, but the room had shifted. The mood wasn't light anymore. Leavitt had turned the segment into something sharper, not a comedy routine, but a live confrontation. Stephen reached for humor again. Well, if comedy's a crime, then lock me up, he quipped, grinning. But Karoline shook her head. If comedy's the excuse for lying, then someone's got to call it out. That's why I'm here. She raised a tablet from the table beside her. With a swipe, a clip rolled on the screen. Stephen's show from 6 months ago. In this segment, he claimed Trump called dead soldiers losers. But in the full, unedited version, now playing, Trump's voice clearly referred to something else. The distortion was undeniable. Karoline turned back to him. You built a whole monologue around a sentence that was never even said the way you portrayed it. Millions watched that and believed it. You didn't correct it. You monetized it. Stephen sat still, eyes narrowing. The audience didn't laugh. No cheers, no chants. Just the weight of the footage echoing behind them. She took a breath, calm but resolute. I'm 27, and maybe you think I'm easy to push around. But truth matters to people like me, to Americans watching who are tired of being mocked, misled, and misrepresented. And for the first time all night, Stephen had nothing to say. The silence was louder than any applause that could have followed. Stephen Colbert leaned back, visibly unsettled, as the clip behind Karoline Leavitt faded to black. The air in the studio was thick not with laughter, but with something rare for late-night television. Accountability. Karoline didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She simply looked across the stage at a man who had built his brand on mockery, now confronted with the consequence of that very brand. You have a platform most Americans can only dream of, she said, her voice steady. But instead of using it to challenge ideas honestly, you distort, you mock, you reduce everything to a punchline. Stephen exhaled sharply, still trying to regain control. So now I'm responsible for how people interpret comedy, he asked, his tone wavering between sarcasm and defense. Karoline replied, You're responsible for how you shape perception. You know how powerful your platform is, and you know when a joke is just a joke and when it's a weapon. The audience was no longer watching a segment. They were witnessing a confrontation that had peeled away the facade of studio polish. Karoline had come not to debate, but to reveal land. She had done just that. Then she turned slightly, addressing the camera directly. For the people watching at home, this isn't about defending Trump. This isn't about partisanship. This is about truth. And every time you let someone lie to you in the name of entertainment, they'll do it again. She paused for a beat. So don't just laugh. Ask questions. Watch the full clip. Check the context. Don't let your beliefs be written by people who think truth is optional. That final line hung in the air like a closing gavel. Stephen didn't respond. He stared at her not with anger, but with the look of someone who realized, for once, he was no longer in control of the narrative. The camera cut to black. But in that silence, the internet was already erupting. Within hours, clips of the exchange would flood X, TikTok, and YouTube. Hashtags like Team Leavitt exposed. And Truth Over Comedy would trend worldwide. And Karoline Leavitt, once dismissed as too young, too new, or too conservative, had done what few had ever dared. She had walked into the lion's den and made the lion blink.